Let's have a look at what you're saying on our Facebook fan page. Our first comment is from Bata MC Ifenyi, and Bata says, yes, we can. There should be a real concern about the issue of food on the African continent, but with little cooperation from our leaders, this might continue to be an egregious problem. Our second thought is from Nepias Makweni. Nepias says, hunger is not only an issue in Africa, but everywhere in this world. The food distribution program must be politically free so that all affected countries can benefit. And our final thought, slightly cynical, from Maji Iboda is, I know these initiatives mean well, but all these corny phrases like feeding the world, caring for the earth make me cringe. We have enough knowledge, money, science and technology to feed everyone in Africa. All we lack is the will of our leaders to make the right choices on our behalf. Well, it looks like all the blame is being put upon the leaders. Maybe the people can talk to their leaders more. Is it fair to blame the politicians, as our viewers seem to be doing? Is it that simplistic?
I think the politicians deserve their share of the blame.
Sure.
Because certainly there's work that they could be doing that.
But they're elected by those people.
Well, I'd say, you know, that's probably another programme altogether. But essentially, I think government, if they don't get, because of the way tax collection works and everything else, governments don't really feel that they have to really sort of make the people happy because they don't pay most of their wages. Mm-hmm. And if you're a big oil resource country, then you've also got other sources of income other than tax.
Sure.
But essentially, I think one of the key things that the government deserve their part of the blame, but essentially when we look at, I think it's really important to basically kind of, when we look at some of the, especially all these international programmes, I think the key thing is, I actually think they all have a role to play. I think, you know, the NGOs have a role to play, World Hunger Day has a role to play.
But what about individual big businesses who have access to billions of dollars? How much of a link is there with them? And can you think of any examples where that might work well?
Well, there are two ways in which big business gets involved. First is basically obviously in commercial agriculture, and even in the countries with the largest representation of commercial agriculture, they tend to be less. You know, they don't represent as large a proportion of agricultural production. Most of it is actually 70% of employment in Africa is in small-scale agriculture, and they still produce the bulk of what we see when we look at the big numbers.
Yes, yes.
I'd like to just sort of kind of I think it's very important when we look at Africa and when we look at where everybody is contributing to basically look at the sort of top-down, because we talk about Africa as one continent, but it's actually some countries have got very high self-sufficiency. They produce a lot. They're not enough to basically cover, but they've got high GDP because they're selling oil or copper in Zambia.
Yeah.
And so they can basically,
like South Africa or Nigeria and so on. But also South Africa still has a hunger problem.
Exactly. And but they've got so they fund so that's again the sort of disparity between rich and poor. Mm-hmm. And so what you basically see there is if you look at on a sort of global level, they can basically buy imports in. But do the poor on the ground have the access to go and basically do they have access to that? So
are you talking about a system that challenges the very nature of capitalism?
Absolutely, and I think the heart of it is poverty reduction. Because even when you've got countries with high GDP, relatively, you know, their self-sufficiency, and when self-sufficiency I mean the difference between what a country is producing and what it's using.
Yes.
And so if a country is basically producing more than it's using, it will have a self-sufficiency of more than 100% and less than 100% if it's not. Yes. Now, a lot of countries, most countries in Africa now are lower than 100%, but South Africa is one of those which is relatively high. But even so, its poor still do not have access to food.
Yes, yes.